Thomas decided to ruin his ex-wife Mia's life for divorcing him and thus ruining his dreams of a happy life. And Thomas, you might say, since childhood, had dreamed of living in the big city in his apartment, not in the old house of the suburban village where he was born and raised. Thomas began to realize his dream by selling his house, but the money from the sale was only enough to buy a room. And then Thomas decided to get married. He didn't care who he married, as long as she also had at least her own room in the city. We will combine our square footage, and my dream would come true, thought Thomas. Thomas didn't dream of love and children when he thought of getting married. He dreamed only of increasing his living space. That said, Thomas was well aware that the woman he was marrying did not need to know the true reasons for his attentions to her. Let her live her life, Thomas thought, in her dreams, and I will live my dream. And everything happened just as Thomas had dreamed. He met Mia, who also had her own room, and they became husband and wife. And then Thomas began the next phase of his plan. He began to persuade Mia to exchange their 2 rooms for 1 apartment. Convincing Mia wasn't easy. Mia offered to rent an apartment for the first 2 years. She said she didn't know how things would work out. What if it didn't work out? That's all I needed. Thomas thought, what do you mean, it won't work out? To take it off? It means that at any time, if she doesn't like it, she'll leave me, because she has somewhere to go. But if she has nowhere to go, that's different. Then I can do whatever I want, and she won't say a word to me. And Thomas was so convincing that everything would be great for them that Mia agreed, and they traded their rooms for 1 2-room apartment. And soon their daughter was born. And that's when Thomas felt like a man who could afford anything. And he would get nothing for it. Now she's completely in my power, Thomas thought. The child, for one thing. Second, an apartment with nowhere to go. And Thomas began to live the way unmarried men live. But Mia didn't put up with her husband's antics for long and filed for divorce. For Thomas, of course, this was a surprise. At first, he thought his wife was frightening him in this way. But when he realized that it was serious, it was too late. They were divorced. That's when Thomas made the decision to ruin his ex-wife, Mia's life, for divorcing him. And in doing so, she ruined his dreams of a happy life in the most beautiful city. I will give her a happy life, thought Thomas the day after the divorce. She would regret her decision. What made Thomas most angry was that Mia had decided to get a divorce, even though she had nowhere else to go, and they would now have to live in the same apartment. I could assume anything, Thomas thought, but not this. Being left without a husband and a small child, and also sharing an apartment with me, she sure is strange. Thomas remembered convincing Mia not to get a divorce, and all his arguments then revolved mainly around their housing problem. Do you think it's easy to live in a 2-bedroom with your ex-husband? Thomas asked. And you and I, Mia, will be if we get divorced. Come on, Mia. You can still make things right. Take the form back. I'm still your husband and the father of your child. I've made up my mind, Mia said. And it's not going to be any harder than it is now. And what kind of husband are you? Especially a father, because you're hardly ever home. And if you do show up, you're always either angry or drunk. What's wrong with you? Thomas wondered. Angry or sober? You think you'd rather find a husband who's kind and sober. Don't get your hopes up. You're not the kind of woman who gets good husbands, Mia, to people like you. Unless it's only out of pity. And afterwards, of course, they become evil and drunk. Is that all? No one wanted you without a child but me, Thomas went on. And with a child, you're no use to anyone else. Is that all? What are you going to live on? Thomas asked. Oh my God, Mia exclaimed. What am I going to live on? You're no breadwinner now, are you? What am I going to live on? On your salary? It all goes to you. You forget I'm not a housewife. I work too. So you don't have to worry about that. What I've been living on is what I'll be living on. Plus, I'll get alimony from you. "Come to your senses, you fool," shouted Thomas. "Alimony on my 30,000. What kind of alimony is that? That's ridiculous." "And what is it?" said Mia. "Anybody else would have held on to me with both hands," Thomas said. "You're a husband and a father, no matter what." "You're not a husband," said Mia, "because you've long ago traded me for others." "Yes, sometimes I have others," Thomas said, "but I don't bring them into the house." "Now you can bring them into your house with a clear conscience," said Mia. "I don't mind." Even so, Thomas was surprised. "You can have your own room and bring whoever you want there," said Mia. "Will you have your own room?" Thomas began. "It's just like before the wedding," said Mia. "The only difference is that now our rooms will be under the same roof." "Are not you going to be jealous?" Thomas asked cheerfully. "I can see that your feelings for me have not cooled." "What do you think?" Mia answered. "I only will not change my mind. My daughter and I are going to live in our room." "What good would that do you?" Thomas was angry. "Imagine what would happen if we were roommates. Imagine what would happen if our apartment became a communal apartment." "I have a lot to gain," Mia answered. "There's nothing to imagine. And if you think to disrupt the order of our communal apartment, I'll find a quick fix for you." "What do you mean? I don't get it, Thomas." "What were you thinking?" Mia was surprised. "If anything happens, I'll call the precinct, or I'll call the squad. They won't play with you. They'll sort you out in no time." "What do you mean?" "I don't get it, Thomas." "You want me to call the police on your own husband? You wouldn't be my husband anymore. Don't you remember?" Mia reminded me. "You're living in a fog. Wake up. We're already divorced. So if you want to bring guests here, make sure it's quiet, okay?" Remembering those conversations, Thomas was angry and planning how to ruin his ex-wife's life. But now it's been 2 months since the divorce, and Thomas still hasn't come up with anything yet. What on earth is that? I thought, Thomas, my whole life will go by like this, and I won't do anything. What did I live for, I wonder? No, I had to think of something to make her regret leaving me. And the reason Thomas was most angry was that Mia was getting a lot of visitors, and not always women. Thomas even reprimanded Mia, and she told him to go fuck himself. Thomas hissed angrily, lurking in his room, and came up with a plan for revenge. But everything Thomas had planned was stymied by some infraction that he would have to answer for under the law. And Thomas didn't want that. He remembered how Mia had warned him that if anything was wrong, she knew where to turn. And the frustrating thing for Thomas was that as soon as he got divorced, he immediately stopped working out with other women. It was all from nerves. Thought, Thomas, I'm gonna ruin her life. Calm my nerves. I'd go back to the way things were. I'm not even 40 yet. You could say I've got my whole life ahead of me. A happy life. But as time went on, nothing changed. Mia was living the happy life of a free woman, and Thomas was having none of it. What was to be done? Thomas wondered how to ruin her life. How can I make her feel better? I see she's been too happy lately. It's been 3 months since the divorce, and Thomas has no thoughts in his head. He couldn't sleep at all. Either Mia's happy face or his failures with other women were always before his eyes. And then suddenly, it happened that Mia herself gave him a way out. Should I sell my share? Mia pondered aloud in the kitchen when Thomas was there and go far away, so she wouldn't have to see your sour face. So that was it. Mia thought happily, Thomas, your happy days are over. A holiday has come to my street too. Thomas reasoned that if he could not ruin his ex-wife's life, someone else would. Thomas decided to sell his share of the apartment. I've decided to sell my share, Thomas said. Do you want to buy by chance? Thomas knew that he was legally obliged to make such an offer. I don't have that kind of money. Mia replied indifferently. So offer it to someone else. Look, Mia, Thomas said angrily. I'll find a worse one and sell it to him. You won't be any worse, Mia said. "We'll see if it is," Thomas said, and started looking. He looked for a long time, looking for something that one look at him. It was clear that he could not be worse. And he found one. Not right away. Of course, before that, he had to turn down a lot of people who seemed good to Thomas. But in the end, he found one. His name was Oliver. Thomas knew at a glance that Oliver was exactly the man he needed. Everything was there: the way this man looked, the way he talked, and the way he behaved during the inspection of the apartment. Even Mia, just coming out of the room and looking at him, gave a frightened owl and quickly hid in her room. Red eyes, face all wrinkled, long, gray and sparse hair, long gray beard and mustache, sparse black teeth sawching. Hands trembling, muffled, hoarse voice, and the smell that usually comes from those who have not washed for a long time. "It was you I was looking for," thought Thomas then. "If I'm scared, I can imagine how scared Mia was. That's creepy. A horror movie character. I can't even look at him. Not like talking to him, like he's only allowed to walk the streets. But that's a good thing. Now she'll have to see this man every day. Isn't that a blessing? Why don't you sell it to someone else?" That's when Mia asked. "After all, you have your daughter living here. Think about her." "No, Mia," Thomas answered confidently. "He's the only one I'll sell it to. This is for everything, so that you remember." Thomas used the money to buy himself a room in another neighborhood. After a while, Thomas decided to see how his ex-wife was living with her new roommate. He called Mia, and under the pretext that he wanted to see his daughter, he asked to visit. "Come over," Mia said. "Just remember, I'm married now." "What do you mean married?" Thomas was confused by the turn of events. "It's not even a year since we broke up, and you're married now. It just happened," Mia said. "Love and everything." "I'll expect you at what time?" "At 7:00 p.m., Thomas said. "It will be interesting to see your husband." "So you've already seen him," Mia said. "It's Oliver." "Oliver," Thomas said in a faint voice. "He is the one you gave up your share for," said Mia. "Are you crazy?" Thomas shouted. "What kind of husband is he? If he has just bought a room." "He bought a room recently," said Mia. "I've known him for a long time. We met about a week after our divorce. We've been thinking about getting our own room for a long time. So I gave you the idea. And don't you get it? He sold his room and he bought yours. And just so you don't have any doubts about the fact that he's the worst, he did it for you. Oliver has a good friend who works as a makeup man in the theater. He helped turn Oliver into a horror movie character. It was scary, wasn't it?" Thomas didn't go to see her that day. He needed to calm down, think things over, come to his senses. How did that happen? I thought Thomas wanted the worst, but he got the best. And what a shame. He had made her happy with his own hands. At the same time, behind the walls of his room on the right and on the left, his many new neighbors were living loudly. But even the fact that they were all like him, divorced middle-aged men, did not comfort him. It had been 2 years since the divorce. Oliver and Mia had bought a 3-room apartment. Mia recently became a mother for the second time, and Thomas still doesn't work out with women. Every time it comes down to it, Oliver shows up in front of his eyes.